I do hope you enjoyed the show, ladies and gentlemen.
I've heard of off-Broadway, but this is ridiculous.
Bob Hope had the amazing career embracing everything. Theatre, radio, television, films. He'd done the absolute lot, world famous, known in every country. And the idea that you were going to meet this man and actually work with him was quite daunting.
I'm an innocent man, and if you have any justice in you, you'll accept my bribe. Why don't you come over here? I just met a bee that wants to tell us all about the birds. See, a carpenter or a plumber, I just went down the drain there.
When you met him, like some of the other great people I've worked with, not remotely complacent, didn't assume that everything's going to be fine because I am me. No, he wanted it to be right all over again.
You know, it's just what I wanted, a peekaboo sweater. Oh.
I don't make them laugh in the first 2 or 3 minutes. They'll say, oh, that's the great Bob Hope, is it? I admired that. He'd done all that, and yet the man wasn't complacent. He still was going to work at it.
Stick around, folks. He could be wrong, you know.
Don't big empty houses scare you?
Not me. I used to be in vaudeville.
Like so many of the comedians of that era, he trod the boards in vaudeville, didn't he?
He'd done his training. He'd done his apprenticeship, going on with strippers and all sorts of things and trying to hold your own in the course of the show. A lot of the great ones, the Jack Bennys and George Burns and people, they'd all done that.
Yeah.
So by the time fame started beckoning, they were ready.
We could sort of claim him as our own because he was born in South London, but I think he went to America at such a young age. I don't think he was especially British.
What's fascinating about Hope as such a distinctively American comedian is that he was actually born in England. And when he went to the States, very young, and finally started to work in the comedy circuit, he didn't go to the Catskills like the Jewish comedians did. He went into vaudeville. Vaudeville was like a magazine show. They had comics, they had singers, they had dancers, but it was all spun around the comedy acts, in fact.
He started on the vaudeville circuit, which would be literally going from town to town. And in America, that could take weeks to get around, a few gigs, because the distances are so huge. They would all get in the bus and they would drive, and the next night they would do another show, and the next night they would do another show. So it was exhausting work. It's a young person's job, that one.
It wasn't automatic for him to make it.
Most of the best people who finish up at the top are survivors. They haven't had a smooth ride all the way through.
Yeah.
And he certainly hadn't in the earlier days. And that makes them even better, even when they make it. They know what they've been through, and they're grateful for where they've finished up.
I know what you mean. When I first started in vaudeville, the only thing that kept me alive was the vegetables the audience threw at me. Yes, sir. Welcome to my 35th anniversary on television. You know, for 35 years, I've been doing these specials on NBC. Who said crime doesn't pay? Now, NBC has always treated me well. I'll never forget my first little dressing room. I can't. I've still got it.
His style was relentless, line after line, bang, 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 and he's on to the next line. This was a maestro at work.
With this season, I'm going to be on for Texaco, and I was their logical choice. After all, who has more mileage than I have? But actually, Texaco and I have a lot in common. In fact, I've been giving America gas longer than they have.
Bob Hope's material was joke after joke after joke. He wouldn't let you catch your breath. He'd link every joke, even if there wasn't a link there. He would link it on to the next one. And another thing, and I noticed this, and do you think?
His first joke's good, second joke, but the fifth joke's as good as the first joke. It's no better, it's no worse. It's just, you feel he could reel off 100 jokes. They'd all be neatly constructed. A great expert deliverer of gags.
Hey, and how about Prince Charles and Princess Di's new baby? They named him Prince Harry, and he's third in line for the throne. That puts me down another notch. No, he's third in line for the throne. We had 7 kids in my family, and I had to wait forever to use the throne.
I loved his sort of technique of, he'd tell a joke and not just wait around. He would tell the joke and then, almost as he was thinking. And another thing, you know, and it would break into the laugh, which is quite a daring thing to do. But actually, I think it usually works out. The timing of laughs, to me, the ones I really admire are the ones that tell the joke and then keep you going at the same time, you know, and they're on to the next thing.
I think professional would probably be the word. He was immensely professional in the way that the comics of that era were.
In 25 years, I've never missed a show because of illness. No matter how sick NBC gets of me, I show up.
Having had a lot of success in vaudeville, he was quite quickly picked up for radio. And because of the speed of his dialogue, he was a natural for radio. I mean, there was no dead air when Bob Hope was on. I mean, he could actually just pump out the jokes.
Thank you very much. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Bob broadcasting from San Francisco Hope. Well, here we are in the Golden Gate City. I love playing in San Francisco with all these hills. It's really wonderful. When you lay an egg here, it rolls down and disappears into the bay. The dogs here in San Francisco don't have their tails clipped. They just wear them off going down the hills.
From there, it was just a very small step to television. It was very soon after that he was offered his first film role.
Hollywood saw him and they cast him in something called The Big Broadcast of 1938, where he sang what would then become his signature tune, Thanks for the Memory.
Thanks for the memory of rainy afternoons, swingy Harlem tunes, motor trips and burning lips and burning toast and prunes. How lovely it was.
The song Thanks for the Memory, which he did actually in his very first film, became his signature tune. And he was able to use that and adapt it for any given circumstance.
When he would be singing during the Second World War, he would change the lyrics of Thanks for the Memory to make them humorous, topical, or mess around with them. It became so well known and so well attached to him that he could not use it as a brand, he could change it itself.
So thanks for the memory of crap games on the floor.
Nights in Singapore. You might have been a headache, but you never were a bore.
Thank you so much.
I remember he did a Parkinson show. John Junkin and I had written his 1000th lyric for Thanks for the Memory, his signature tune, and he would sing a topical lyric. And we'd written this lyric. John couldn't be there that night for whatever reason, and I'm sitting with Bob Hope, who hasn't met Michael Parkinson.
Right.
What's this guy Parkinson like? I said, he'll interview you on from a kneeling position. And he laughed. John Junkin and I had written this lyric with topical references for here, some of which didn't register with him, but he trusted us.
Yeah.
And he sang a few lines in that song that he thought, what?
Yeah.
And immodestly, they got a laugh from the audience.
Yeah.
Though the audience didn't have time to really laugh while you're singing a song.
Yeah.
But as a song, I think it went pretty well.
Yeah.
Thanks for the memory of faults that you forgave, rainbows on a way,
And stockings in the basin when a fellow needs a shave. I thank you so much.
Sammy, what can I tell you? I was out there tonight. Oh, man, you were something. You know how I feel when I see a performer like you kill the people the way you did tonight? Oh, rotten.
How would you describe his persona?
His persona with the audience was, I think, smart ass.
Yeah.
He was a sort of quite jovial man who knew he was good.
Yeah.
And yet you knew, he's doing a joke here about his own conceit. His idol was Jack Benny. And Bob Hope said about Jack Benny, Jack doesn't come on a stage, he commands it.
Yeah.
And I mean this admiringly, but I think what he stole from Jack Benny was the conceited coward act. Bob Hope would be the funny non-hero in a film, you know, failing as a coward and everything.
Yeah.
Going west in a covered wagon. That's my kind of life. Blazing new frontiers, facing danger, privation, and death. Is that my kind of life?
Now remember, Painless, you promised to love, honor, and protect me.
Yeah, let's do it in the order named.
All right, get moving, folks. We'll get a good early start. The sooner we get past that Indian country, the better.
Indian country. Do we have to go that way?
Now, Painless, I'll be with you.
Bob Hope's persona was very slick and smooth. He was very smart. He was slightly smarmy. In a way, that was part of his shtick initially. Certainly in the early years, in the 40s and in the 50s, his shtick was that he was the guy who was like those guys, but he was rubbish at it. So he would be the slick, confident guy who was also a coward, or he would be the womanizer who could never actually get a woman. So he would play this kind of very, very establishment figure full of self-love, and then he would always undercut it.
He had a limited but useful range of acting skills. He wasn't obviously not a great actor, but he could be in films and have that. It wasn't always sort of looking direct to camera. It was always that feeling that he was relating to the audience watching.
Say, you were right before. I was touting that horse. I admit it. I confess. I've been touting horses all afternoon. Put me in jail. Please put me in jail.
Are you kidding? What kind of a new racket is this?
Well, I'm a citizen. I pay taxes. I got a right to be put in jail. Slap him on me.
Are you trying to make chumps out of us again?
No, I just touted Moose Moran by mistake. I touted him off a winner. He'll kill me.
Well, you know it, and we know it, and Moose Moran knows it. But it would sound very peculiar in court.
I'll have him drafted.
Do you think he had a funny face? Because he had an accident when he was a young man. He was working with his brother, cutting trees down, and the tree went down, and it would have killed him, but he managed to get round the other side of it. But when it hit the ground, it whacked up into his face, and they rebuilt his face at a time when they weren't doing a lot of rebuilding faces, and he ended up with that kind of sharp look and what Bing called the ski jump nose.
Yes.
Do you think that helped his comedy?
I think it's an element, because I think most of the distinctive stars, they're stars obviously to start with because of their talent, but most of them have a very distinctive look.
Yeah.
They don't look quite like anybody else.
Yeah.
And Bob Hope didn't look like anybody else around in films at the time. As soon as he came on, you knew who that was.
Yeah.
You, sir, have cast aspersions on my dear old daddy. The brave, low-down, mangy, crooked, drunken hero who won the West. And if you weren't as weak and as old as you are weak and old, aren't you? You are. Put up your dukes.
You read about President Kennedy saying we should all drink milk? Milk. Maybe he's younger than we think, huh? Milk. Is he really Irish? No, the president served milk at a cabinet meeting, but it didn't turn out well. They spent a half hour just burping each other.
Bob Hope was never ashamed of hiring and finding great writers. And he would never claim that he wrote all his own material. He would talk about how he had a great team. He worked with over 100 writers in his career. And he would, in the early days, with the radio, for instance, he would get young writers into teams, and he would divide the teams into three, and get each team to produce a script for a show. And then he would take the three scripts and he would choose the best bits and throw the rest away. But he would never, when I say throw away, he wouldn't. He would store it. He had a filing cabinet in his house which had every single joke that had passed through his hands, whether he told it or not. When he died, it went to the House of Congress library, where it fills 85,000 pages of microfiche. He was very, very meticulous and professional about getting writers to work, and also about changing and finding new writers.
How do you like this little jukebox for Easter I have on? Isn't that a pretty formal, huh? This is what Grover Whalen wears to bed. Of course, the real reason I'm wearing this little outfit is the fact that a lot of performers die on television, and if that happens to me, I want to be prepared for it.
His stand-up act, or his performing act, was sustained by lots and lots of writers coming up with lots and lots of gags. But that's not, and that doesn't mean to say that's the job done just because you've got a lot of writers. He had to select the gags, learn the gags, deliver the gags, and there was a refreshing quality in the sense wherever he was, he would have material about this location and topical material. He would just have gag writers on standby.
Hey, how about the Russians blasting Nixon's trip to China? They said the whole thing was a phony trick to get Nixon reelected. I think that's kind of silly. How many red Chinese are registered Republicans?
There's a great sketch from 1965 where Bob Hope comes on. He's a guest of Jack Benny, and they're both dressed as surfers, and they've got comedy surfer wigs and surfboards. And they do this sketch where they keep calling each other daddy-o and man, and they're sort of mocking the language of American teens, and they look absurd because they're both men in their 60s.
I wonder if this is the right spot. Better be, because we're out of gas. I can hardly wait to get out there and hang 10.
You know, this is my favorite sport next to skydiving.
But what makes it extra brilliant is that the Beach Boys are standing behind watching this and giggling, and then the Beach Boys are in it. So you have Bob Hope in a hippie wig making jokes about surfing with Brian Wilson as straight man. It's absolutely marvellous.
How come no floorboards? We sit low. It's the only way we can stop. Real dragon, man. Never mind the carp. We want to use our boards. Now, tell us where the big ones are breaking.
You mean you don't know this part of the ocean?
Nah, we've been doing our surfing at Arrowhead.
Arrowhead? That's a lake. Yeah, how do you get your waves?
We got our own jacuzzi.
He made over 50 films. Again, there he was, relentless, line in the films, still avowedly playing a character. And then his greatest success in films was with Bing Crosby.
What's the matter with you? You can't sell me. I'm not a horse. It's just the way I comb my hair.
I know, Orville. You and I know you're not a horse, but these people are peculiar.
Well, what are you talking about? You going nuts? Why would a guy buy a guy?
I don't know. They buy anything, any old junk.
But you can't do that to me. You can't sell me. You don't own me.
Oh, no, not now. No, he does.
Well, why would he buy me? What does he want me for?
I didn't ask him.
Bob Hope became a household name largely thanks to the Road 2 movies, which he filmed with Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, at the age of 37, had a problem in that he was a singer and he was not getting the parts. So he had to create a vehicle for himself. He had to work out a way to stay busy. And so he had seen Bob Hope on a bill. He knew that he could sing. They got together, did the first Road movie, and then they developed an amazing style. They created a style of comedy which is still fresh today, which is two guys bantering. Each time one of them tells a joke, the other one will top it, then the other one will top it, then the other one will top it.
The Road 2 movies were absolutely made for them. Road to Singapore was the first one. They brought Dorothy Lamour because they obviously needed a sort of love interest, or they needed someone that they could fight over. And she was really game for it. They were enormously successful, probably the very first film franchise. They went on to make 7 road movies.
Bravo! I think he wants her to give up cigarettes. Yeah. You want that dude to snap out your front rack?
You don't think I'm afraid of him, do you?
I am.
He made quite a few films before the Road movies, but then something obviously clicked with Bing Crosby. And I guess it was Bob Hope was a comedian who also sang. Bing Crosby was a singer who also told a few jokes. So they weren't really treading on each other's toes. They complemented each other perfectly because one was more of one and one was more of the other.
I think my favourite of them is Road to Morocco. Road to Morocco is an absolutely classic comedy, and it has one of the funniest scenes in it involving a camel, where Crosby and Hope are sitting side by side, and there's a camel between them that they can't see. When his head comes down, and he kisses one, and then he kisses the other, and they think that they're kissing each other.
You know how I feel about you. I guess in my own way, I sort of love you.
All right, but you don't have to slobber all over me. Guess I kind of love you, too.
Yeah, now wait a minute, Junior. Stop kissing me.
What are you talking about? I didn't...
You did too.
Look, are you crazy? I don't mind being kissed, but this is ridiculous.
It's got the funniest payoff as well, which is probably an accident, where the camel just snorts and Bob Hope sort of goes, "Oh!" and actually leaps off the screen.
Let's take a ride. This is probably one of the... Oh!
I'm absolutely convinced that that is one of those happy accidents.
I used to love the Road 2 films, and there was a good relationship there, but it was the Bob Hope that I wanted to be. And Crosby I wasn't too sure about, but we're grateful because he carried the film with the songs or whatever it was. But there was something about them. Every time you put on a new one, you knew you were in good company to start with, and you were smiling and laughing and a happy person.
The road movies were a huge success because they did have that kind of chemistry that you can't really fake.
Hey, wait a minute! What are you gonna do with two girls?
That's my problem.
Hey! Hey! Hey, come back! Wait for me! Oh, no, you don't. Stay right where you are, folks. This picture isn't over yet. Stay right there. Keep your seat. Hey! Here! Hey! Oh, no, you
It's a nice, smooth drink. Pour a little in your glass and drink it right down, but be sure and ask for Guzzler's gin. A nice, smooth drink.
Bob Hope was travelling from the UK to the United States on the day that war was declared. And he was on a boat. He offered to sing for the passengers just to sort of cheer everybody up on that day. And that's where he began this idea of becoming actively involved in the war effort, not as a soldier who was too old and not fit, but as an entertainer. And so he started to entertain the troops in the American USO.
Say, how do you feel, Jerry?
I feel fine.
You're fine.
I'm in the pink.
You're in the pink.
Yes, I left the blue ones in the laundry.
Yeah. The only man in the world can kiss a girl and give her the brush off at the same time. There he is. Look at that jungle. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Look at that.
Careful, careful.
Huh?
Snipers.
He toured and toured and toured through the most terrifying conditions, particularly later in the Vietnam War, but in the Second World War, he would get very close to the front line.
The entertaining the troops aspect of his career is a rather odd one, because a lot of comedians, singers, all sorts of people do from time to time go and entertain the troops. But for him, it was almost like the main strand of his career for many years. He wasn't just doing it as a, oh yes, I'll do that for a couple of weekends because somebody asked me. That was an established part. The shows were produced that he did there, and I think they were owned by him. And so he became identified with that kind of performing.
I bet when I started, you thought I was lousy, huh? Follow me, Benny.
Somebody like that coming out to you wherever you are. There are some people I'd rather they just stayed at home and didn't come and entertain. But you'd feel that he was there because he wanted to be there and was fun. And I thought he was brilliant with them.
I wish that I could kiss each and every one of you.
You want to get us trampled to death, are you kidding? matter? You blowing your roof or something?
He never stops going out. Why does his act work so well with the troops?
Because of the endless satisfaction of making an audience laugh, but not just that, making an audience laugh, plus the fact I hope I'm doing my bit here with these guys who can be sent away to be killed, and I want to make them laugh. I want to give them relief in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
I'm from Detroit, Michigan.
What's your question?
Okay, I'd like to know what's your least favorite thing about making these tours to foreign lands?
Well, actually, it's all the vaccinations you have to take, you know. I now have so many holes in me, when I walk out to pick up the mail, I water the azaleas.
Hey, listen. The man that's after you just killed my brother. Here's a tip. He draws from the left, so lean to the right.
Draws to the left, so lean to the right.
My absolutely all-time favourite moment of Bob Hope is in the film Paleface. He's going to have a shootout in a town with a bad guy. And of course, he's completely incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he imagines himself to be a really great gunslinger. And as he's leaving the saloon to meet the guy on the streets, he gets bits of advice from each of the cowboys that he passes.
I'll let you in on something. Long towards sunset, there's a wind from the east, so you better aim to the west.
He draws to the left, so lean to the right. There's a wind from the east, so better aim to the west.
I know this Joe like a book. He crouches when he shoots, so stand on your toes.
He draws to the left, so lean to the right. There's a wind from the east, better aim to the west. He crouches when he shoots, so stand on your toes. Thanks.
He's trying to remember all this, and as he's walking down the street, of course, he gets it all wrong. It's an absolutely classic trope and incredibly funny.
He draws from the wind, so lean when you stand. No. Stands on his crouch with his toes in the wind.
He's an extraordinarily enthusiastic golfer, and there's even a tournament named after him, the Bob Hope Classic. Golf was a great way of course, socializing and getting to know fairly high-powered people, not just celebrities, but politicians. All of them played golf.
Bob Hope liked playing golf, and he liked presidents, to the degree that in 1995 he played a round of golf with 3 presidents, the first time those any 3 presidents have gathered together to do anything. He was part of that kowtowing. He was part of the status quo.
Old school comedian. He's more at home on the golf course with the President of America than making jokes about the condition of the country. So inevitably he looked like a comfortable figure rather than an undermining figure.
When we were chatting, he said, I'm not popular with the young ones in America. I'm a hawk, friend of the president. This was Vietnam time. And this was a man who'd gone all over in the Second World War into dangerous areas, entertaining the troops, and was revered by them. This guy was their jester who'd come to see them in the middle of all this mayhem and horror, and yet not regarded by the young generation as if he was some friend of the president who this, that, and the other. And this all came pouring out. He told me all about this.
And we got a great audience. We always see all the brass here. Looks like a slow leak at West Point. And the holidays are so emotional here. I saw one big GI kiss another GI. He said, I can't help it. He's my replacement.
For Bob Hope, supporting the troops was essential, and during the Second World War that made him a national hero, it made him an icon. come the Vietnam War, American public opinion, particularly young, particularly entertainers, particularly that sort of, liberal group, are very, very anti this war. And Bob Hope would continue to go out and continue to entertain in exactly the same way as he had for World War II. And that began to disconnect him from the new audience.
When it came to the Vietnam War, he was that much older and younger people were very against it. And there wasn't the same solidarity over this being something that everyone must get behind. So he did find it harder as he got older. He represented the generation that the 60s generation were rebelling against. He was, in a sense, he was the epitome of the previous generation that they were trying to replace.
No doubt the troops were very pleased to see him and come along entertain, but it put him in that sort of category of the, establishment, as you call it in this country, of very much the powers that be. He was that sort of comedian. Now, the way he was delivering jokes was the same, over all that period, but the flavour of where he was in the sort of political spectrum, I suppose, altered around him.
You know that a couple of jerks had the guts to ask me, said, do the guys in Vietnam still like your show? What about that garbage, huh? I mean it sincerely. And we go places. No, and when guys like you will sit out in the rain for 5 hours, I ain't never gonna stop coming here because you're my type, I'll tell you that.
Sure you're aware that the Academy has awarded me the highest honor it can bestow, an Oscar?
Well, who doesn't know about your Oscar? Anyone who drives by your house can see it on your lawn.
Not anymore. The other night, some two-bit, no-talent, frustrated little actor swiped it.
Oh, really? That's terrible. Any idea who it was?
Not a clue.
Good. Well...
Bob Hope was one of the first comedians to play the Oscars as a host again and again and again. He played it in the end 19 times.
Anyway, welcome to the 47th Annual Academy Awards, and I'm here again for my annual exercise in masochism. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the Music Center, and we'll soon know if it has any significance holding these ceremonies so close to Chinatown.
I suppose what's interesting now, watching his Oscar presenting, is that he's a little bit older than Oscar presenters kind of are now, generally. So his relation to the nominees is just slightly different. He's more like an elder statesman, sort of surveying all the pretenders to the throne. The format is clearly his, really. I think the Oscars have kind of stuck with that style of just presenting a series of sharp one-liners about particular movies, particular trends in movies.
Oh, there's some great pictures. I think Godfather Part 2 has an excellent chance of winning. Neither Mr. Price nor Mr. Waterhouse have been heard from in 4 days. And I'm really not this fat. I'm wearing a tuxedo with a bulletproof cummerbund. Who knows what'll happen if Al Pacino doesn't win?
He hosted the Oscars for several years and never won one.
Yeah.
And he said, this Oscar night is known as Passover in my house.
But don't get me wrong, there's not a jealous bone in my body, but some of my flab is furious.
Radio, TV, and film, and obviously the live stand-up shows. Where do you think he excelled the most?
Well, whenever I saw Bob Hope in a film, he wasn't quite like anybody else. He wasn't a comic actor or the comedian playing a role. He was still Bob Hope, the comedian. He'd be in the middle of the plot, but he's still doing lines. Yeah. He's still doing jokes, regardless of the situation.
Yeah.
And he did a marvellous one called The Cat and the Canary, a sort of haunted house thing. And it was very well shot, and the horror bits are very good. But in the middle of it all, he's doing lines. He never changed that, whatever he was doing.
Valley girl, hold it. Right there, stay there. Well, where's that cellar? Oh, say, in case I don't come up in about 5 minutes, better make it 4 or even 3. Is there a Brother Elk in the house?
I'm not an elk, but I used to be a Girl Scout.
Oh, good. Then you can start a fire with sticks in case our feet freeze. Come on.
He was cast in a film called The Cat and the Canary, which was a remake of a comedy horror film. And that is fantastic because he's opposite Paulette Goddard in that, and there's like a murders in an old dark house.
Wally, tell me, what's going on? What are you all driving at?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, but whatever it is, I just want to tell you that I'll protect you. There isn't anything living that I'm afraid of. Hardly.
Oh, it's only the clock.
Oh. Oh, I thought my time had come. I'm awfully sorry. I guess this house is getting me.
From there, he made a film called The Ghost Breakers, which is one of my favorite of his earlier films, which is all set in a haunted Cuban mansion.
When a person dies and is buried, it seems there are certain voodoo priests who have the power to bring him back to life.
How horrible.
It's worse than horrible because a zombie has no will of his own. You see them sometimes walking around blindly with dead eyes, following orders, not knowing what they do, not caring.
You mean like Democrats?
The Ghost Breakers, in particular, is very successful because, of course, he plays the sort of coward. He's a cowardly man, and yet he's always cracking jokes. And yet, at the same time, the films are genuinely scary. They are quite creepy. So that balance of comedy and horror, which is very hard to do, is almost at its peak in those films.
Hey, boss, you ain't going upstairs, are you? Where does Ghost is?
Listen, you stay there. And if a couple of fellas come running down the stairs in a few minutes, let the first one go. That'll be me.
Jeff, you're losing your buttons. You mean you'd eat me without vegetables?
Calm down now. Calm down, Junior. I'm not going to do anything right away. I might not do anything for a week or so. Not until I get desperate.
Oh, Jeff, you wouldn't like me once I bit my tongue and I tasted awful. Help! Jeff, don't... Turkey, look!
My first memory of Bob Hope is on a Sunday afternoon watching one of the Road 2 films with my parents. I was very young, and they were laughing and they were laughing, and I didn't quite get it. And then there was a little routine, which him and Bing Crosby did, who was his co-star, which was the patty cake routine. And what they would do is when they were in trouble, they would do this elaborate patty cake, and halfway through, they would punch 2 people and knock them out, and that's how they'd escape. And I remember laughing at that, because as a small child, that kind of knockabout slapstick is hilarious.
I'm going with them.
Oh, you're going with them?
Yeah, I'm going with them.
Oh. Patty cake, baker's man. Bake a cake as fast as you can.
This is now quite common that you'll tell the same joke again and again and again, and the third time you hear it, it's funnier than it was the first time. But the patty cake was a bit of business. They would always do it, and then sometimes they would undermine it. Sometimes it would fail and it would go wrong, and so you knew what it was, but you didn't know what was going to happen. So it was really epitomized that great relationship between, on-screen relationship between Hope and Crosby.
Well, I don't mind getting killed, but they're going to torture us.
Oh, no. No, I couldn't stand torture.
Me neither.
Oh, they're not going to torture me. It hurts.
Well, there's only one thing to do.
Yeah. Ready? Patty cake, baker's man. Bake the cake as fast as you...
Life can be cruel to comedy. Even the great Bob Hope started to go out of fashion. But this man, with his great career, all careers start to fade. Even Bob Hope.
Bob lived to 100. 80 years he was in the business.
Yes.
So is there something, the longevity, could that be to do with the work, keeping the brain?
Yes, I think if the brain's still active, you're in with a chance. And loving what you do, actually enjoying with all the drive and everything, but underneath it all is an enjoyment of what you're doing. You enjoy your job.
Yeah.
And I think the Bob Hopes and the George Burns and people loved what they were doing, and their age to them was meaningless. It was just a number.
Hate to leave you, but that's fate. Oh, you darling.
Bob Hope was one of those comedians who was referred to a lot by the comics I kind of grew up with. They often cited him as an influence, or he was obviously very respected within the industry. He was kind of such a big name that he'd reached a level, I think, where he was famous beyond what he actually did.
Are you turning chicken?
I think so.
He's been known as America's greatest entertainer, and he was an absolute superstar. I mean, roads have been named after him.
I'm only kidding, Tony. I'm all for your nose. It's better than living alone.
Bob Hope is a guy that I always felt that I would get on with really well. It was whatever he was in, with films or whatever, I felt this is the guy I like and want to be. I loved Bob Hope as being a friendly, really good comedy actor.
Wait, I've been chased by women before, but not while I was awake.
Well, why does it surprise you? I support a lot of hospitals.
Yeah, but this one has no maternity ward.
Bob Hope was one of those people who seemed to always be there, and he had a very, very long career. A proficient, efficient comedian, and managed to have a career which lasted longer than many people's lives, so he did very well with it.
Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
We are all about books this week on Sky Arts, bringing you the best from the 70th Cheltenham Literature Festival, live every night from 7.